The morning my husband had his stroke, I was in the backyard, deadheading the roses. Our neighbor from across the street came running through the gate, still in her slippers, yelling my name. She'd seen the ambulance pull up. I hadn't even heard it. By the time I got to the hospital, my son-in-law was already in the waiting room. He'd been closer. His office was only 10 minutes away. He stood up when he saw me, and his face said everything before he opened his mouth. My husband didn't die that day, but he never came back to himself either. He spent 11 days in the ICU before they moved him to a long-term care facility in Beaverton. He could squeeze your hand if you asked him to. He could track you with his eyes. But the man who used to do the Sunday crossword in pen, who could recite baseball statistics from 1987, who had managed every dollar our family had ever earned, that man was gone. I'm not sure exactly when I realized something was wrong. Not with him. With us. With the money. It started with a phone call I almost didn't pick up. I was eating cereal, standing over the kitchen sink. I'd stopped setting the table for one, when my cell rang. Unknown number, Oregon area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. The man on the line introduced himself as a loan officer from a credit union I'd never heard of, Pacific Crest Financial. He said he was calling to follow up on a missed payment. I told him he had the wrong number. He read off my address, my full name, my husband's name. He did not have the wrong number. That was a Wednesday in February, 8 months after my husband's stroke, and it was the first crack in the wall. The first sign that the life I thought I understood was built on something I'd never once thought to look at. My husband and I had been married for 41 years. He was an engineer by training, methodical and precise the way engineers tend to be. He built spreadsheets for our grocery budget when we were newlyweds. He tracked every car repair in a little green notebook he kept in the glove box. When our daughter was in college, he could tell you her tuition balance to the dollar without looking it up. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He'd given me every reason to. I'd worked part-time most of our marriage, first as a dental hygienist, then as a school librarian after the kids came along. I kept my own small account for personal spending. Everything else, the mortgage, the car payments, the investments, the taxes, that was his domain. He'd always said, "You worry about the house, I'll worry about the numbers." It felt like a partnership. It felt like love, even. After the stroke, I became his power of attorney. That was when I started seeing the accounts. I want to be precise about this, because I've had a long time to think about the order of things. The first account I found looked normal. Checking, savings, the joint accounts we'd always had. Balance was lower than I expected, but he'd been paying the mortgage solo for years since I'd retired. I told myself that made sense. The call from Pacific Crest didn't make sense. I drove to their branch on Canyon Road the following Monday. A young woman named Sandra helped me. She had a kind face, and she spoke slowly, the way people do when they're delivering news they know will land hard. There was a home equity line of credit on our house, opened 6 years ago, my husband's name only. Current balance $118,000. I asked her to repeat it. $118,000, she said again, and it was 9 months past due. I drove home on autopilot, sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Then I went inside and called my son-in-law. He's an accountant. I want to tell you that detail because it matters later. My daughter had married a careful man, the kind who reads contracts before signing them. I asked him if he could come over that week and help me go through some paperwork. I didn't tell him why. I wasn't ready to say the words yet because saying them meant they were real. He came on Thursday evening, and within an hour he'd found 4 more things I hadn't known existed. A second home equity loan from a different lender, $74,000. A brokerage account in my husband's name only, opened 15 years ago. Balance $203. A personal loan from an online lender. $31,000, opened 2 years before the stroke. And a safe deposit box at our regular bank, the one we'd used for 40 years, that I'd never been told about. I stared at that last item on the statement for a long time. My son-in-law sat across the table from me, his hands folded in front of him, waiting. He was being careful with me. I could see him choosing his words. "Did you know about any of this?" he asked finally. "No," I said, "not a single thing." The bank was a 10-minute drive. I'd been going there since we moved to Portland in 1987. The branch manager knew my name. I called ahead, and she said I could come in Friday morning. She met me at the door with that particular expression people get when they know something you don't yet. Sympathetic. Braced. She'd pulled the records. My name was listed as co-holder on the safe deposit box. My husband had added me years ago, apparently, though he'd never mentioned the box existed. She gave me the key, walked me to the back, and left me alone. The box was a standard small one, the kind that fits in the palm of your hand almost. I carried it to the private room and set it on the table. I sat down. I'm not a woman who prays often, but I sat there for a minute in something that felt close to it, just breathing, asking whatever was listening to let it be something explainable. A life insurance policy I'd forgotten. Old coin collections, something that made sense. I opened it. There were 2 folders and a sealed envelope. The first folder held investment records. My husband had been day trading, not casually, obsessively, going back nearly 20 years. Page after page of transactions, gains early on, mounting losses as the years went on. He'd chased the losses the way some people chase drinks, doubling down, trying to claw back what was gone. Total losses, as best I could calculate sitting in that small room, were somewhere above $340,000. The second folder was worse. It held records for a whole life insurance policy, one he'd borrowed against, 3 times. The cash value was gone. If he died now after paying premiums for 22 years, the payout would be less than $8,000. I closed that folder and held it in my lap for a while. Then I opened the envelope. It was a letter in my husband's handwriting. His handwriting before the stroke. Neat, slanted slightly right, the way it had always been. If you're reading this, something happened to me before I could fix it. I need you to know I tried. For years I tried. I thought I had more time. It started with a good run in the market. I tripled what we had in 14 months. I thought I finally understood it, that I had the instinct for it. I was wrong. When it turned, I couldn't accept it. I borrowed against the house to make back what I'd lost. Then again, and again. Each time I told myself it would be the last time. I was going to tell you when I'd fixed it. I kept thinking, 1 more good year and I can put everything back, and she'll never need to know. I wanted to protect you. I understand now that I was protecting myself from your reaction more than I was protecting you from the truth. The house will probably need to be sold. I'm sorry. That's not enough, I know. I love you. That was never part of the lie. I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in my purse. I walked out of that bank on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. My daughter lived 20 minutes away in Lake Oswego. I drove there without calling first. She opened the door and took one look at my face and said, "Mom, what happened?" Not a question. She knew something was wrong. I told her everything sitting at her kitchen counter, the same counter where I'd helped her put together her daughter's birthday cake the month before, the same counter where ordinary life happened. I laid out the folders, and I told her what was in them. She didn't speak for a long time when I finished. Then she said, "Dad would never do this." I watched her say it. I understood why she needed to. Her father had coached her soccer team. He'd taught her to drive in an empty parking lot in the rain. He'd slow danced with her at her wedding while I stood on the side of the dance floor trying not to cry. I have the documents, I said. There has to be an explanation, something you're misunderstanding. His letter is in my purse. She didn't ask to see it. She stood up and started washing the dishes that were already clean in the drying rack, her back to me. That was when I understood that I was on my own with this, at least for now. I drove home and called my son-in-law instead. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, "Okay, here's what we do first." That was when I was grateful, more than I can say, for the kind of person my daughter had chosen. The attorney my son-in-law found was named Kevin Ostrowski. He had an office in downtown Portland, on the 14th floor of a building with a view of the Willamette. He was probably 60, unhurried. With reading glasses he kept taking off and putting back on while he looked through my documents. He asked me a lot of questions I didn't know the answers to. Had I ever signed anything related to the home equity loans? Had I received any mail from Pacific Crest Financial before this year? Had I been present for any meetings with financial institutions in the last decade? No, and no. He took his glasses off and left them off this time. Your husband had power to act unilaterally on accounts that were solely in his name, he said. The home equity loans are more complicated because they're secured against a jointly held property. Whether you're liable for those in spite of the fact that you clearly didn't consent and didn't receive the funds is going to depend on Oregon law and how aggressively the lenders want to pursue it. What are my options? I asked. We contest the loans on grounds of fraud. We document that the signatures, if yours appear on anything, are forged or that you signed under misrepresentation. We contact the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services, and we start a probate process that puts everything on the table. He's not dead, I said. A pause. No, but with a full power of attorney and his incapacity, we can file to manage his estate as if. What are the odds? He looked at me steadily. Decent, but it's going to take time and money. I thought about the $203 in the brokerage account. I thought about my own savings, the modest account in my name only that I'd kept separate since the beginning of our marriage. The money I'd set aside for my library salary over 30 years, mostly untouched. My own private small country. Tell me what to do, I said. The next few months were a blur of certified mail and phone calls I'd never asked to be making. Kevin filed challenges with 2 of the lenders. A forensic accountant he recommended examined the loan applications and found that on 2 of them, my signature appeared, except I hadn't signed them. The handwriting expert's report was 8 pages long. Her conclusion was 2 sentences. The signatures attributed to the wife do not match samples of her known handwriting. They are consistent with a deliberate imitation. My husband had signed my name. My husband, who'd held my hand in the delivery room twice, who'd read to me when I had my gallbladder out, who had never once in 41 years raised his voice at me, had sat down somewhere and practiced forging my name until he could do it well enough to fool a loan officer. I sat with that for a long time. My daughter still wasn't talking to me, not really. She'd called to ask about her father's care, how he was doing, whether the facility needed anything, but when I tried to tell her about the legal proceedings, she'd get quiet in a particular way, the kind of quiet that's actually a door closing. My son-in-law told me she'd been driving to the care facility alone on Tuesdays, sitting with her father. He said she cried in the car on the way home. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't entirely. What I did instead was work. I'd been retired for 2 years when the stroke happened. After the safe deposit box, I knew retirement wasn't going to be an option much longer. I took a part-time position at a branch library in Multnomah Village, 3 days a week, shelving and helping patrons with the computers. The pay was modest. The routine saved me. I met a woman there named Doris who worked the reference desk. She was 72, sharper than most people, half her age, and she had a way of getting to the point that I admired immediately. She'd been divorced twice and had strong opinions about financial independence, which she shared freely and without apology. One afternoon, when it was slow, she looked at me over the top of the book cart and said, "You seem like someone who learned something hard recently." I laughed. It was the most honest laugh I'd had in months. I told her, not everything at once. In pieces, over several slow afternoons. She listened the way good reference librarians listen, without interrupting, without projecting, asking only the questions that helped you figure out what you were actually trying to say. One day she said, "You know what bothers people most when they hear your story. Not what he did, what they're afraid they'd do in your position. They're afraid they'd never look." I thought about that for a long time. She was right. The comments I was starting to see, because my son-in-law had encouraged me to write some of this down, to share it somewhere. I'd been hesitant, but I was starting. The comments that hit me hardest weren't the sympathetic ones. They were the ones from women who said, "This is me. Right now, my husband handles everything, and I've been too afraid to ask." 6 months after I found the safe deposit box, the first lender settled. They agreed the signature on the application wasn't mine. The $74,000 loan was wiped from my liability. I sat in Kevin's office when he told me and cried for the first time since all of this started. Not from sadness, from the specific exhaustion of having fought for something that should never have needed fighting for. The second lender was harder. They argued that I'd benefited from the equity line, that money had flowed into our joint household, that benefit equaled consent. Kevin's counter was methodical and, I thought, devastating. He showed that every dollar from the Pacific Crest line had gone directly into my husband's trading account, and from there into losses. Not a cent had paid a household bill or bought groceries or fixed the furnace. It had vanished into the market. The hearing was on a Thursday in November. My daughter came. I didn't know she was going to be there until I walked into the hallway outside the hearing room, and she was sitting on a bench by the window, her hands in her lap, still in her work clothes. She looked up when she saw me. She'd been to see Kevin on her own, she told me quietly. 2 weeks before, she'd asked to see the documents herself. He'd shown her everything, including the letter. "I owe you an apology," she said. I sat down next to her. "You were protecting him." "I was protecting myself." Her voice was steady. "If it was true, it meant I'd spent my whole life not knowing who he really was. I couldn't stand that." "I know," I said. "Does it ever feel better?" she asked. I thought about Doris. I thought about the woman at the library last week who'd quietly asked me about resources for financial abuse and had taken the sheet of numbers I'd printed out like it was something precious. "It feels different," I said. "I'm not sure better is the right word yet." The judge ruled in my favor. The Pacific Crest loan, all $118,000 of it, was removed from my liability. The lien on the house was released. My son-in-law grabbed my hand in the hallway. My daughter hugged me and held on for a moment too long, the way she used to when she was small and had been frightened by something. I didn't feel triumphant walking out of that building. I felt like someone who'd been in a car accident and had just gotten the all clear from the doctor. Grateful, shaky, very tired, and not at all the same as before. That winter, my daughter started joining me on Sunday afternoons. We'd drive out to see her father together. He knew her, I think. His eyes would track her when she walked in, and sometimes, when she held his hand, his fingers would tighten briefly. Whether that was recognition or just reflex, I couldn't say. Neither could the doctors. We'd talk to him anyway. She'd tell him about her kids, about her garden, about a book she was reading. I'd sit in the chair by the window, listening, watching the light change over the parking lot. One Sunday, she looked over at me and said, "I found his trading records, going all the way back." I know. The first 10 years were good. He made real money. I know that too. Then why did he keep going when it stopped working? I'd thought about this for a long time. I'd talked about it with Kevin, with Doris, with a therapist I'd started seeing on Tuesday mornings. I didn't have one clean answer. I think he was chasing the version of himself who'd been right the first time, I said. I think he couldn't stand being the man who'd gotten lucky and then lost it all. He needed to be the man who'd figured it out. She was quiet for a while. That sounds lonely. I think it was, I said. I think he was very lonely with it. I'd had to sell the house. That had been clear from early on, and I'd stopped fighting it once the loans were cleared. We simply owed more than we could manage. I moved into a smaller place in northeast Portland, a condo near a coffee shop and a Thai restaurant, and, as it happened, a short drive from the library branch where Doris and I both worked. The condo was the right size for one person. I'd gotten better at thinking of myself as one person. I opened a new account at a credit union I'd chosen myself for the first time in my adult life. Just my name. I set up automatic transfers into a small investment fund. Conservative, boring, exactly what I needed. The financial advisor there was a woman about my daughter's age who explained everything twice and never made me feel stupid for asking. Doris and I started a monthly gathering at the library. Informal, a circle of chairs in the community room, open to anyone who wanted to come. We billed it as a financial literacy group, but it was really something else, a place where women, and sometimes men, could say out loud the things they'd been afraid to ask at home. How do I find out what's in our accounts? What does a power of attorney actually mean? What are my rights if my name is on a debt I didn't authorize? The first meeting had 6 people. By the 4th month, we had to borrow chairs from the children's section. I told my story at that first meeting, all of it, the deadheading, the roses, and the phone call from Pacific Crest, and the safe deposit box, and the letter, and the forgery, and the hearing, and the house. I told it plainly, without trying to make my husband into a villain or a victim. He was a man who got scared and made choices that cost us everything, and who loved me in the way he was capable of loving, which turned out to be less honestly than I'd believed, but perhaps as honestly as he knew how. A woman in the second row started crying about halfway through and kept going quietly until I finished. Afterwards, she came up and said her husband handled all their finances, had for 30 years, and she'd always thought that meant she was taken care of. "Does it mean I'm not?" she asked me. "It means you don't know," I said, "and you should know. Not because he's lying. Maybe he isn't, but because you deserve to know your own life." She came back the next month with a folder. She'd opened her own account. She'd asked to see all their joint statements. Everything had been fine, she said. Her husband had been a little surprised, but not upset. She'd cried in the car on the way to the meeting from what she said was relief. Not every story ended that way. Some women in that circle found things they hadn't expected to find. One discovered her husband had drained their shared savings to fund a gambling habit she'd had no idea about. Another found nothing wrong at all but stayed in the group because, she said, she finally felt like she was allowed to know things. My husband is still alive. He turned 74 in September. My daughter brings him flowers on his birthday. I bring him a paperback, even though I'm not sure he can read anymore, because he always had one on the nightstand, and the habit of bringing one feels like something I can still do. I think about the letter sometimes, the part where he wrote that he wanted to protect me. I believe him, in the way you can believe something that was both true and also a way of lying to yourself. He wanted to protect me. He also didn't trust me with the truth of who he was when things went wrong. Those aren't the same thing, but they can both be real inside the same person. I've stopped being angry, not because I've decided he deserves forgiveness, but because the anger was taking up space I needed for other things. Last spring, I was shelving books in the 600s, the practical knowledge section, home repair and medicine, and personal finance, when a woman came in and stood next to me and asked, a little too quietly, if I knew where the books on financial abuse were. I put down the stack in my hands. I walked her over to the shelf. I handed her 2 books and then I said, I've been through something like this if you want to talk. We sat at one of the reading tables for almost an hour. She didn't tell me her last name. She didn't need to. When she left, she paused at the door and looked back. I thought I was being paranoid, she said. I thought I was the problem. You're not, I said. Trust that feeling. Go look. She nodded. Then she left. I stood there for a moment in the quiet of the library. The familiar smell of paper and carpet cleaner. The sound of a child asking his mother to read it again. And I thought about all the things I hadn't known for 41 years, and all the things I know now, and how those 2 lists don't cancel each other out, they just both exist. You carry them both, and you keep going. I went back to shelving. The 600s, practical knowledge. That felt about right. I think about the word trust differently now than I did a year ago. I used to think trust was something you gave to a person, and they either kept it or broke it. Binary. Clean. But it's not that simple. And I know that now in a way I couldn't have known before I opened that safe deposit box. What I found inside wasn't just my husband's secret. It was evidence of what happens when a person stops being honest, first with the people they love, and then, slowly, with themselves. He made a choice to hide things from me. Then he made another choice, and each one came out of the one before it the way a crack in a foundation spreads if nobody looks at it. That's the part I've had to sit with, not the money. The money is just numbers, and numbers can be rebuilt over time. It's the pattern that's harder to understand. Every choice he made was an attempt to fix the one before it without ever having to tell the truth. And the longer that goes on, the more impossible the truth becomes to tell. I don't say this to excuse him. I say it because I think understanding how something happens is different from forgiving it, and you can do one without the other. What I've learned, what I'm still learning, is that being a decent person in a partnership isn't just about not lying. It's about not making yourself the only one who gets to know the full story. My husband thought he was protecting me. Maybe part of him believed that. But protection that requires keeping someone in the dark isn't protection. It's control with a kinder name. Real decency, the kind that holds a marriage together through hard things, means saying, this is what's happening, even when what's happening is embarrassing or frightening or something you haven't figured out yet. Doris asked me once what I wished I'd done differently. I thought about that question a lot. The honest answer is that I wish I'd been more curious earlier. Not suspicious, just curious. I wish I'd asked to understand, not because it would have changed what he did, but because I would have known my own life. There's a kind of intelligence that isn't about being clever. It's just about staying awake to your own circumstances, asking questions, not outsourcing your understanding of important things to someone else, even someone you love. I didn't do that. And while what happened wasn't my fault, the not knowing was something I could have changed. And then there's the part about getting back up. Kevin told me early on that these cases could take a year or more. Doors never let me feel sorry for myself for longer than one slow Tuesday afternoon. My daughter, once she stopped protecting the version of her father she needed him to be, showed up with a steadiness that still surprises me. None of us got through the hard parts by waiting for it to get easier. We just kept doing the next thing. Filed the next document, showed up to the next meeting, put one more chair in the circle for someone who needed a place to sit. That's what I want anyone to take from this, if they take anything at all. Not that marriages are dangerous or that you can't trust the people you love, but that you are allowed to know your own life. You are allowed to ask. And if something ever feels wrong, not dramatic, just quietly wrong, the way a room is slightly too cold, trust that feeling. Go look. Because the cost of knowing is nothing compared to the cost of finding out too late. I went back to shelving books the next morning. That felt right, too.